Terminator Dark Fate, 2019, brought together a blend of franchise veterans and new talent, forming a cast that bridged the legacy of the original Terminator films with a modern cinematic approach. This casting strategy not only created a sense of continuity, but also allowed for a fresh take on the familiar themes of artificial intelligence, human resilience, and fate. The most iconic return was that of Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor. First appearing in the original Terminator, 1984, and becoming an action legend in Terminator 2, Judgment Day, 1991. Hamilton's portrayal of Sarah Connor evolved from a frightened waitress to a hardened warrior. Her performance in Dark Fate marked the first time she returned to the role in nearly 3 decades. Her reappearance was not just a nostalgic callback, it was a transformative moment that solidified her legacy as one of the most complex and resilient female characters in sci-fi and action cinema. Her portrayal in Dark Fate showed a more weathered and grief-stricken Sarah, shaped by the trauma of her past and the loss of her son. Despite the time away from the franchise, Hamilton's physical and emotional commitment to the role was evident. She trained extensively, embraced the character's aged bitterness, and brought a unique realism to the action sequences. The film's focus on her character gave her career a significant resurgence, with many critics praising her return as the film's emotional anchor. Arnold Schwarzenegger, the other core figure of the Terminator saga, returned once again, this time portraying a unique version of the Terminator known as Carl. Schwarzenegger's history with the franchise is legendary. Beginning with his role as the original Terminator in 1984, his deadpan delivery and formidable physicality became defining traits of the character and elevated him to global stardom. In Dark Fate, however, Schwarzenegger took a more nuanced approach. His portrayal of Carl, a Terminator who developed a conscience and adopted a human family, was a departure from the emotionless machine of the past. It allowed Schwarzenegger to explore layers of humor, guilt, and redemption, offering fans a different take on the character. While he had reprised the Terminator role in multiple sequels with mixed success, Dark Fate gave him a chance to add unexpected depth and finality to his arc. Although the film didn't reignite his career in the way some had hoped, it reinforced his relevance and his ability to reinterpret his most iconic character in new ways. Among the new cast members, Mackenzie Davis stood out as Grace, an augmented human soldier sent from the future to protect Danny Ramos. Davis, previously known for her roles in films like Blade Runner 2049 and the television series *Halt and Catch Fire*, brought a unique combination of vulnerability and strength to the role. Her physical transformation for the film included intense fight training and muscle gain, allowing her to perform many of her own stunts. Grace's character straddled the line between human and machine, and Davis captured this internal conflict with impressive subtlety. Her performance was often praised as one of the film's highlights, and while Dark Fate was not a major box office success, it showcased her as a leading action star and expanded her range in Hollywood, opening doors to more high-profile roles. Natalia Reyes portrayed Danny Ramos, a young woman in Mexico City who becomes the target of a new Terminator model and the future leader of the Resistance. Reyes, a Colombian actress with a background in Latin American television and film, was relatively unknown to international audiences before Dark Fate. Her casting was significant not only for diversity, but also for the symbolic passing of the torch to a new generation. Danny's arc, from an ordinary factory worker to a leader destined to save humanity, mirrored that of Sarah Connor, and Reyes brought authenticity and emotional depth to the role. Her chemistry with both Davis and Hamilton added to the believability of her transformation. While the film didn't catapult her to instant stardom, it introduced her to a global audience and marked an important step in diversifying the traditionally Anglo-centric action genre. Gabriel Luna played the Rev. 9 Terminator, the film's main antagonist. Known for his role as Ghost Rider in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Luna combined menace and charm to portray a Terminator capable of splitting into 2 separate entities, a liquid metal exterior and an endoskeleton. His interpretation of the Rev. 9 was more personable than previous Terminators, using social engineering and manipulation alongside brute force. Luna's physicality and screen presence were instrumental in crafting a villain that felt both familiar and terrifyingly evolved. His performance received positive feedback, particularly for his ability to make the Rev. 9 seem deceptively human before unleashing deadly force. Although Dark Fate wasn't a massive commercial hit, Luna's role in a major Hollywood franchise elevated his status and demonstrated his capacity to lead blockbuster action narratives. Rounding out the key cast was Diego Boneta as Diego Ramos, Danny's brother, whose role, though brief, provided the emotional stakes early in the film. Boneta, best known for his portrayal of Luis Miguel in the biographical television series, brought charm and realism to the sibling dynamic. His presence, although limited, helped ground the story in a relatable family setting, reinforcing Danny's motivations throughout the film. Collectively, the cast of Terminator Dark Fate represented a deliberate blend of old and new. Bringing back beloved franchise icons while introducing fresh talent allowed the film to honor its legacy while attempting to evolve for a new generation. For Hamilton and Schwarzenegger, it was a return to form, reaffirming their cultural importance. For Davis, Reyes, and Luna, it served as a launchpad into the global spotlight, with varying degrees of career momentum following the film's release. While the movie itself faced challenges at the box office, the performances were largely well-received, and the casting choices were seen as one of the film's strongest aspects. Each actor brought a distinct energy to their role, contributing to a narrative that, at its core, sought to humanize its characters even amidst a futuristic war of machines. Terminator Dark Fate was released in 2019 with the intention of reviving one of Hollywood's most iconic science fiction franchises. While its financial performance was underwhelming compared to expectations, its cultural impact and historical significance are layered and worth analyzing, especially considering its themes, representation, and the legacy it attempted to carry forward. Dark Fate tried to reconnect the series to its origins while also reshaping the narrative for a new era, socially, politically, and culturally. One of the most significant cultural aspects of Terminator Dark Fate was the return of Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor. Her reappearance after nearly 3 decades was not just a nostalgic move, it was also a major statement about aging women in action cinema. Hollywood has long sidelined female action heroes after a certain age, and Hamilton's rugged, no-nonsense portrayal of Sarah stood in stark contrast to that trend. She was not de-aged, sexualized, or softened. Instead, she was presented as an older woman with a rich, painful history and a mission still burning inside her. This portrayal resonated with older audiences and feminist circles who saw her return as a win for authentic representation. Sarah Connor's presence challenged the idea that only young characters can drive action plots, making Dark Fate part of a larger movement toward inclusivity in genre films. In addition to Sarah Connor, the film centered on new female protagonists, Grace and Danny Ramos, positioning women at the very core of the story. This shift mirrored broader social changes happening around the time of the film's release, including the rise of the Me Too movement and the push for more gender-balanced storytelling in Hollywood. Grace, played by Mackenzie Davis, is a physically augmented human soldier, while Danny, portrayed by Natalia Reyes, is an ordinary woman who becomes a future resistance leader. The choice to reframe the savior of humanity as a young Latina woman marked a major cultural shift within the franchise. Traditionally, Hollywood action films have centered white male protagonists, so placing Danny in this role sent a message about the changing demographics of cinematic heroes. It was a step toward acknowledging the importance of diverse voices and faces in stories that shape global pop culture. The film also reflected on themes of immigration, particularly in its early sequences set in Mexico and its depiction of a border crossing. The characters must navigate an American immigration detention facility, and the presence of drones, armed border patrol, and cages drew clear parallels to real-world headlines about immigration policy in the United States. While Terminator films have always addressed technological fears and societal anxieties, Dark Fate incorporated more direct references to contemporary issues. This setting wasn't just a backdrop. It was a deliberate choice that grounded the science fiction narrative in present-day struggles, making the story more relevant to modern audiences. Critics and viewers noted these connections, sparking discussions about how science fiction can engage with pressing social debates in ways that are subtle yet impactful. In terms of pop culture, Terminator Dark Fate contributed to the evolving conversation about legacy sequels, also known as reboot sequels, following the pattern of movies like Star Wars, The Force Awakens, and Halloween, 2018. Dark Fate ignored several previous sequels and instead positioned itself as a direct continuation of Terminator 2, Judgment Day. This strategy reflects a cultural moment where studios and audiences alike are looking for ways to reconnect with beloved franchises while correcting or ignoring past missteps. It's a recognition of both nostalgia and the desire for renewal. In this way, Dark Fate was part of a broader cultural experiment in how to handle long-running properties with complex histories. The film's portrayal of artificial intelligence and automation also ties into ongoing cultural anxieties about the future. As societies across the globe continue to grapple with the implications of machine learning, surveillance technologies, and the erosion of privacy, Terminator Dark Fate once again brought these fears to the forefront. Though the movie's premise relies on fictionalized time travel and killer robots, the underlying fear of machines becoming uncontrollable resonates more than ever in the age of deepfakes, drones, and autonomous systems. While the Terminator franchise has always played with these themes, Dark Fate refreshed them with modern aesthetics and concerns, inviting new conversations around the role of technology in everyday life. Social media played a key role in the cultural footprint of Dark Fate, particularly in the lead-up to its release. The return of Linda Hamilton became a viral topic, with behind-the-scenes training videos, interviews, and promotional material being widely shared. Fans celebrated her return, turning her image into a symbol of strength and endurance. Memes emerged portraying Sarah Connor as a badass grandma figure, drawing affection and admiration across multiple age groups. Arnold Schwarzenegger's involvement also brought a wave of nostalgia, often referenced in online culture with his classic one-liners and stoic demeanor. While memes often reduce complex narratives into simple jokes or images, they also play a role in keeping a film relevant in the public consciousness, especially among younger audiences who engage heavily with online platforms. Furthermore, the film's emphasis on generational legacy, both within the story and in its casting, mirrored larger cultural conversations around passing the torch. This was a time when major franchises were retiring older heroes and introducing new ones. Much like Luke Skywalker and Leia in Star Wars or Laurie Strode in Halloween, Sarah Connor returned not just to lead, but to guide the next generation. The emotional weight of these transitions was particularly significant to longtime fans who had grown up with these characters and now saw them grappling with age, regret, and mortality. Dark Fate contributed to a new kind of storytelling in action and sci-fi where emotional legacy and character growth were prioritized over pure spectacle. There were also discussions around the film's commercial performance and what it indicated about franchise fatigue. Some argued that despite its efforts to modernize and diversify, the Terminator series had perhaps run its course in the cultural imagination. Others felt that the film was unfairly judged and that its poor box office return reflected marketing issues more than the content itself. These conversations are part of a larger cultural reflection on how audiences engage with legacy properties, how expectations are shaped, how success is measured, and what kinds of stories still have room to evolve. Terminator Dark Fate, regardless of its financial outcome, served as a significant cultural artifact in the late 2010s. It stood at the crossroads of nostalgia and innovation, representation and expectation, old fears and new realities. By returning to its roots while attempting to update its message, the film invited reflection on the past, present, and future of both cinema and society. In doing so, it became more than just a continuation of a sci-fi franchise. It became a mirror for cultural anxieties and aspirations at a time of rapid change. The production of Terminator Dark Fate was an ambitious undertaking, both logistically and creatively. It was a project that attempted to reboot a franchise that had experienced a series of underwhelming sequels, and its development involved many moving parts, from key personnel returning to the challenges of shooting across international locations. The behind-the-scenes story of Dark Fate is one of collaboration, compromise, and a relentless pursuit of authenticity, especially given the weight of its cinematic legacy. One of the most notable aspects of the production was the return of James Cameron as a producer. Although he did not direct the film, his involvement was heavily publicized and seen as a major step toward restoring the credibility of the franchise. Cameron had directed the first two Terminator films, both critically acclaimed and culturally transformative. After years of creative differences with previous sequels, Cameron finally regained partial control of the property when the rights reverted to him. Though he delegated directorial duties to Tim Miller, known for directing the first Deadpool film, Cameron remained heavily involved in the film's development, script revisions, and post-production decisions. His presence was felt in both the technical and narrative aspects of the film, particularly in the desire to return to the grounded tone of Terminator 2. Director Tim Miller brought his own style to the project. Known for his work in visual effects before moving into directing, Miller approached the film with a strong focus on action choreography, special effects integration, and character-driven storytelling. He often spoke about wanting to return the franchise to its roots, a story about humans fighting for survival against machines, with emotional stakes and practical effects playing key roles. The creative tension between Miller and Cameron reportedly became a point of contention during the editing process. While Cameron preferred a streamlined, thematic cut that leaned on emotional arcs and political subtext, Miller pushed for more aggressive pacing and character exploration. Though both men publicly downplayed any major disagreements, insiders have since acknowledged that creative differences led to two separate cuts being tested before the final version was locked in. The casting process was another crucial element behind the scenes. Bringing back Linda Hamilton was not a foregone conclusion. After stepping away from the series decades earlier, Hamilton had reservations about returning. It was James Cameron, her ex-husband and the creator of the franchise, who convinced her that the new story offered something worthwhile. She agreed to come back on the condition that Sarah Connor would be portrayed realistically, without cosmetic gloss or action movie glamour. Hamilton undertook an intense physical training regimen months before filming began, working with military advisors, firearms instructors, and stunt coordinators to authentically embody Sarah's warrior persona. Her commitment influenced the tone of the entire film and elevated the credibility of the action scenes. Filming took place across various locations, including Spain, Hungary, and the United States. The use of international locations helped provide visual diversity while also keeping production costs manageable. The opening scenes, set in Mexico City, were largely filmed in Alicante, Spain, where entire urban sets were reconstructed to replicate Mexican neighborhoods. This decision allowed the crew more control over shooting conditions while avoiding the logistical complications of filming in high-traffic urban areas. Other key sequences, like the airplane cargo fight and the final battle at the hydroelectric dam, were filmed using a combination of real locations and soundstage work, with extensive use of blue and green screens. The action sequences in Dark Fate were among the most complex in the franchise's history. One of the most demanding set pieces was the aerial cargo plane sequence, which involved stunts performed at great heights, intricate wire work, and a mix of practical and digital effects. The scene took several weeks to shoot and required careful coordination between the stunt teams, the actors, and the VFX department. Mackenzie Davis, who played Grace, performed a significant portion of her own stunts and endured long hours of training and physical preparation. The same goes for Gabriel Luna, whose portrayal of the Rev. 9 involved high-intensity action choreography and the use of motion capture technology to blend his performance with digital enhancements. Visual effects played a massive role in bringing the film's advanced Terminators to life. Industrial Light and Magic ILM, the same company that worked on previous Terminator films, returned to handle the majority of the digital effects. One of the biggest technical achievements was the design of the Rev. 9 Terminator, who could split into two independent units, a liquid metal exterior and a solid endoskeleton. Achieving this required a combination of performance capture, animation, and digital compositing. Unlike previous Terminator models, the Rev 9's transformations had to appear smoother, faster, and more adaptable, reflecting modern advancements in technology. The visual effects team worked for over a year to develop the algorithms and simulations that would make the Rev 9's movements appear believable while still uncanny and threatening. Another notable behind-the-scenes element was the digital de-aging technology used in the film's opening scene. The flashback that depicts a young John Connor being assassinated by a Terminator was one of the most talked-about moments in the film. To recreate the look of the characters from 1991, the production team used facial scans, archival footage, and body doubles. Edward Furlong, who played John Connor in Terminator 2, was digitally recreated using performance capture and face mapping technology. The scene was controversial among fans and critics alike, but it represented a significant achievement in digital effects and raised questions about the future of using actors' likenesses in cinema without extensive live performance. The crew behind the camera was composed of industry veterans and rising talents. Cinematographer Ken Sung, known for his work on projects like Project X and Deadpool, brought a dynamic visual style to Dark Fate. Sung focused on using handheld shots and practical lighting to ground the action scenes and bring realism to the futuristic narrative. The film's physical production also leaned into practical effects whenever possible. For instance, many of the explosions, vehicle crashes, and wire stunts were done in camera, with digital effects added only to enhance rather than replace the practical elements. Costume and makeup teams worked closely with the stunt department to ensure that the actors could perform high-intensity sequences while maintaining the visual continuity of battle-damaged clothing and wounds. Grace's character, for example, required a unique blend of body armor, visible scars, and embedded mechanical elements, all of which had to be consistent across multiple shooting locations and scenes. The makeup department developed a layered prosthetic system that allowed Mackenzie Davis to move freely while still appearing augmented. The plot and narrative structure of Terminator Dark Fate is both a return to the series' roots and a reimagining of its future. By design, the film ignores the events of Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines, Terminator Salvation, and Terminator Genesis, positioning itself as a direct sequel to Terminator 2, Judgment Day. This creative decision is critical because it establishes an alternate timeline where Skynet no longer exists, but where humanity's struggle against artificial intelligence continues in a different form. The film opens with a shocking twist and then unfolds in a familiar chase structure, interwoven with themes of destiny, sacrifice, and generational change. The story begins with an emotionally charged and controversial scene, a flashback to 1998, shortly after the events of Judgment Day. Sarah Connor and her son John, believing they've averted the apocalypse, are hiding out on a beach in Guatemala. Suddenly, a T-800 Terminator, presumably one of many sent by Skynet before its destruction, arrives and kills John. This moment is abrupt, brutal, and sets the tone for the rest of the film. Narratively, it serves a double purpose. It erases John Connor from the franchise's future and sets up the emotional and psychological state of Sarah Connor, who becomes a bitter, isolated hunter of machines. Structurally, this bold opening functions as a reset button for the series, clearing the way for new characters and stakes. The narrative then shifts to present-day Mexico City, introducing Dani Ramos, a young woman working at an automobile assembly plant. Dani's life is ordinary until she and her brother Diego are attacked by a Rev 9 Terminator, a new advanced model capable of separating its liquid metal skin from its solid endoskeleton, essentially creating two enemies in one. Their rescue comes in the form of Grace, an augmented human soldier from the future who has been sent to protect Dani. This echoes the franchise's original structure, protector and target on the run from a relentless killing machine, but with new dynamics, character roles, and technological upgrades. The structure of the film largely follows a road movie format, with characters moving from one location to another, avoiding the Rev 9 while gathering the tools, knowledge, and alliances necessary to survive. As the trio of Dani, Grace, and Sarah Connor, who arrives shortly after the first attack, form an uneasy alliance, the film slowly reveals their individual motivations and backstories. Sarah, who has been tracking Terminator appearances for decades, receives mysterious texts with coordinates every time a new Terminator arrives. These texts have guided her mission of vengeance, and she believes her life's purpose has been reduced to hunting and destroying Terminators. Midway through the film, another major revelation reshapes the narrative. The person sending Sarah the coordinates is revealed to be the very Terminator that killed John, now living as Carl, having developed self-awareness and guilt after completing his mission. Without orders from Skynet, which no longer exists, Carl has lived a quiet life in Texas, raising a human family and integrating into society. Structurally, this moment serves as a narrative and thematic twist, flipping expectations about what a Terminator can become and forcing the audience to reconsider notions of identity, programming, and free will. The inclusion of Carl adds depth to the story and complicates Sarah's arc, creating a tension between revenge and purpose. As the characters converge on their plan to defeat the Rev. 9, the narrative becomes more focused and linear. They secure an EMP, electromagnetic pulse, weapon with the help of military contacts, but lose it during a high-octane cargo plane battle with the Rev. 9. This extended action sequence, one of the film's most ambitious set pieces, marks the transition into the film's final act. From a narrative structure standpoint, the plane crash serves as a physical and emotional low point. Grace is injured, their equipment is lost, and the Rev. 9 is still in pursuit. The survivors regroup and head toward a hydroelectric dam, setting the stage for the film's climax. The climax at the dam is both physical and emotional. The characters must use their combined strengths to stop the Rev. 9 once and for all. Grace, nearing the limits of her augmented physiology, sacrifices herself by giving her power core to be used as a makeshift EMP device. This moment pays off narrative threads laid earlier in the film about Grace's fragility and selflessness. Carl and Sarah work together to deliver the final blow, with Carl sacrificing himself to destroy the Rev. 9's endoskeleton. This moment echoes the ending of Terminator 2, where the T-800 willingly descends into molten steel. The visual and thematic parallels reinforce the cycle of sacrifice that defines these characters. The film ends with Danny and Sarah watching over a young Grace, who is still a child in this timeline. The final scene suggests that Danny, having now accepted her role as a future leader, is determined to change Grace's fate. It is a full-circle moment that echoes the tone of the first two films, hope mixed with uncertainty, action grounded in emotion. Structurally, the film uses this ending to open the door for future installments, even as it provides closure for long-standing characters like Sarah and Carl. From a narrative structure standpoint, Terminator Dark Fate uses a traditional three-act format while incorporating elements of both sequel and reboot. The first act sets the stakes and introduces the new status quo. The second act deepens character relationships and builds conflict, and the third act resolves the central conflict while introducing new thematic elements. The film also uses flashbacks and visions of the future to fill in context, without overloading exposition. Grace's flashbacks to her battlefield surgeries and Danny's future leadership role help expand the world without diverting too far from the main plot. Pacing-wise, the film moves quickly in its first half, with action sequences closely spaced to maintain momentum. The middle portion slows down to allow for character development, particularly with the introduction of Carl. The third act escalates in intensity and delivers on the promise of action spectacle. While some critics felt the film's pacing was uneven, others appreciated the balance between high-stakes action and emotionally grounded storytelling. Terminator Dark Fate also retools the series' familiar motifs. The core formula, a protector sent from the future, a target who becomes humanity's hope, and a relentless machine killer, remains intact. However, the film subverts expectations by altering the roles. The savior is now a Latina woman, the protector is a human augmented with machine parts, and the Terminator is capable of personal growth. These changes refresh the structure while retaining the thematic DNA of the franchise. Another important narrative element is the shifting idea of fate. In previous Terminator films, fate was often portrayed as fixed or inevitable, with characters fighting against preordained events. Dark Fate flips this notion. By killing John Connor in the opening and introducing a new apocalypse created by Legion, a new artificial intelligence that replaces Skynet, The film suggests that the threat of machine domination is a persistent danger rooted in human behavior. This reframing positions fate not as a singular event to prevent, but as an ongoing struggle shaped by choices, consequences, and human resistance. Terminator Dark Fate is a film that, beneath its surface of relentless action and sci-fi spectacle, engages deeply with a series of layered themes and recurring symbolism. As a continuation of the Terminator mythos, it inherits a set of philosophical questions and emotional motifs from its predecessors, while also introducing new perspectives shaped by evolving cultural and political contexts. The film examines issues of identity, sacrifice, trauma, power, technological evolution, legacy, and resistance, all set against the backdrop of a world constantly teetering on the edge of destruction. These themes are conveyed not just through dialogue and plot, but also through visual storytelling and symbolic elements woven throughout the narrative. One of the central themes of Dark Fate is the concept of legacy, who inherits the mantle of leadership, what gets passed down, and how the choices of one generation affect the next. This theme is evident in the transition from John Connor, long thought to be the savior of humanity, to Danny Ramos, who now occupies that role in an altered timeline. The film posits that heroism and leadership are not bound by birth or prophecy, but are forged through experience and choice. Danny's rise from factory worker to resistance leader symbolizes the idea that anyone can become significant in the grand narrative of survival and freedom. Her arc suggests that legacies are not fixed. They can be rewritten, redefined, and reborn in unexpected ways. This theme of legacy is mirrored in the presence of Sarah Connor. Once the mother of the future, Sarah now finds herself adrift after John's death. Her grief is palpable, but her purpose is reignited when she realizes that her knowledge, experience, and tenacity are still needed. Through Danny, Sarah finds a new reason to fight, transforming from a broken figure into a reluctant mentor. The dynamic between Sarah and Danny represents a generational shift and emphasizes the importance of passing on wisdom and strength. Sarah becomes both a symbol of the past and a bridge to the future. Connected to legacy is the theme of fate versus free will, a concept that has run through every installment of the Terminator series. In the earlier films, fate was something to be fought against, an ominous inevitability that haunted the characters. Dark Fate revisits this question from a new angle. With Skynet destroyed, one might think the future has been changed for the better. Yet, in its place, another artificial intelligence, Legion, rises to threaten humanity. This development suggests a cyclical nature of history and human error, where the conditions that lead to doom are not tied to a specific entity, but are part of deeper, systemic flaws in human society. The film's title itself plays with this idea. Dark Fate implies a future that is not only grim but perhaps unavoidable, not because of prophecy, but because of humanity's relationship with technology and power. However, the film also emphasizes personal choice as a means of challenging fate. Grace's decision to return to the past and sacrifice herself to protect Danny is not preordained. It's a deeply human act of agency. Sarah's continued fight, long after she's lost everything, is another example of choice defining destiny. Even Carl, a machine, makes a series of choices that defy his programming, raising a family and ultimately choosing to help Sarah and Danny. Through these characters, Dark Fate argues that fate may be written in broad strokes, but individuals still have the power to shape how that story unfolds. It's not about whether Judgment Day happens, but about how people respond to it. Identity is another major theme, particularly as it relates to humanity and machinery. Grace, as an augmented human, embodies this intersection. Her body is enhanced with mechanical components, yet her actions and motivations are entirely human. She experiences pain, fatigue, emotion, and memory. Her existence challenges the binary between human and machine, raising questions about what it means to retain humanity when altered by technology. Grace symbolizes the potential harmony between man and machine, not as an enemy dynamic, but as an alliance born from necessity and sacrifice. She is both a weapon and a person, and the conflict within her is shown not through dramatic speeches, but through her physical deterioration and emotional resolve. Carl, the T-800 that killed John Connor, represents a different facet of identity. In previous films, Terminators were emotionless tools of destruction. In Dark Fate, Carl has evolved beyond his original purpose. Living among humans, he develops something resembling a conscience, even going so far as to adopt a human name and become a protector of a family. His journey suggests that identity is not fixed but can evolve over time, even in a being that was never meant to grow or change. His symbolic journey from destroyer to redeemer reinforces the idea that even the most rigidly defined entities can transform. Trauma and healing are also key themes. Sarah is portrayed as a woman who has endured incredible pain, not only losing her son but being unable to move on from it. Her emotional armor is as thick as her physical weaponry, and much of her dialogue is laced with bitterness and sarcasm. Grace, too, carries emotional and physical scars from a future battlefield, while Danny is forced to confront unimaginable loss and fear in a very short span of time. Each character's trauma informs their behavior, decisions, and ultimately their growth. The film doesn't offer easy healing. Rather, it portrays survival and resilience as ongoing processes, marked by pain but also by purpose. The characters don't move on from their trauma. They move forward with it, reshaping it into motivation. The role of sacrifice is another thematic pillar. Every major character makes a personal sacrifice for the greater good. Grace gives her life so Danny can survive. Carl gives up the life he built to atone for his past actions. Sarah, long estranged from a normal life, commits herself once again to a battle she hoped was over. This repeated theme of sacrifice underscores a core belief of the Terminator series, that survival is not just a matter of strength, but of selflessness. Sacrifice is portrayed not as a tragic end, but as a meaningful choice that defines the value of human life and the power of human connection. Technology, as always, serves both as a literal and symbolic force in the film. The Rev-9, the most advanced Terminator model, is a terrifying vision of unstoppable technological advancement. It splits into two units, adapts quickly, and mimics human behavior with alarming ease. Symbolically, it represents the fear that technology will evolve beyond our ability to control or comprehend it. It can be in two places at once, turn anything into a weapon, and slip through society unnoticed. It is the embodiment of modern concerns about artificial intelligence, surveillance, and the erosion of human agency in a hyper-connected world. Symbolism is also used in the visual storytelling. The recurring image of water, particularly in the final battle at the hydroelectric dam, suggests themes of cleansing, transformation, and power. Water surrounds the characters as they fight for their lives, evoking both chaos and rebirth. The dam itself, a structure that holds back immense energy, is a metaphor for control, something the characters struggle with throughout the film, whether it's control over their destinies, their emotions, or their pasts. The visual style and cinematography of Terminator Dark Fate play a pivotal role in shaping the film's tone, atmosphere, and emotional impact. As a science fiction action film with roots in the 1980s, Dark Fate had to walk a fine line between honoring the gritty, industrial aesthetic of the earlier Terminator films and updating the look for modern audiences. The result is a film that combines raw, grounded realism with high-tech spectacle. Under the direction of Tim Miller and the lens of cinematographer Ken Seung, Dark Fate uses lighting, framing, camera movement, color palette, and visual effects not just for visual stimulation, but to reinforce the themes of vulnerability, survival, and transformation. The film opens with a sunlit, deceptively peaceful beach scene in Guatemala, John Connor's assassination. This sequence uses natural lighting and handheld camera work to create a sense of immediacy and realism, contrasting sharply with the horrific event that unfolds. The shock of violence in broad daylight becomes more jarring because the visuals are so grounded. This decision to begin with a seemingly mundane setting disrupted by a catastrophic act sets a visual precedent for the rest of the movie. The extraordinary always crashes into the ordinary. A defining characteristic of Dark Fate's visual approach is its use of handheld and Steadicam techniques in action scenes. This choice adds kinetic energy and a visceral quality to the fights and chases. Rather than relying entirely on CGI-heavy set pieces with detached camera angles, many sequences, particularly the early factory attack, the freeway chase, and the detention center breakout, are shot with tight, mobile framing. The camera stays close to the characters, amplifying the tension and chaos as the Rev. 9 closes in. This intimacy allows viewers to feel the physical danger the characters are in, enhancing the emotional stakes. Lighting plays a critical role in establishing the film's tone. Ken Seung and his lighting team often use natural or minimally enhanced lighting sources to give scenes a more grounded look. Warm tones dominate the Mexico City sequences, lending a sense of everyday normalcy and familial warmth, especially during the scenes with Danny and her brother. Once the Rev. 9 appears and the chase begins, the lighting shifts to cooler, harsher tones, signaling the intrusion of death and the future. The shift is subtle but effective, and this transition in color and lighting cues mirrors the shift in Danny's life, from routine to a desperate struggle for survival. The film's color palette evolves along with the narrative. Early scenes are rich in earthy browns, yellows, and warm grays, emphasizing the real-world setting of Mexico. As the characters move north and the story grows darker, blues and steel grays become dominant. The scenes in the detention center, the plane, and the hydroelectric dam all share a cooler, more sterile look. This progression visually tracks the journey from the known into the unknown, from human warmth into the cold domain of machines and war. The final battle at the dam, with its flooding waters and sparks of fire, merges these palettes, blues and oranges clashing in a final symbolic confrontation between humanity and machinery. Special effects and CGI are essential to any Terminator film, and Dark Fate uses them extensively, but often in service of practical sets and real environments. For example, the Rev. 9's ability to separate into two independent units required cutting-edge CGI, but its effectiveness depends heavily on the integration with real-world backdrops and practical stunts. In the factory fight, sparks fly, machinery collapses, and walls are torn apart. Real physical objects are being manipulated, which adds weight to the CGI enhancements. Even in the high-altitude cargo plane sequence, one of the film's most digitally complex scenes, Tim Miller insisted on blending real stunt work with digital effects to maintain physical realism. The result is a stylized but still grounded approach to visual storytelling. The framing and composition of shots throughout Dark Fate are meticulously planned to reinforce emotional relationships between characters. For example, in early scenes between Danny and her family, the camera often uses medium-wide shots with symmetrical framing, placing her firmly within the comfort of her environment. Once the attacks begin, framing becomes more chaotic, off-center, and closer to the characters' faces, reflecting their vulnerability and disorientation. In scenes where Sarah Connor asserts herself, she is often framed in profile or from a low angle, visually restoring her iconic status as a hardened warrior. By contrast, Grace is often framed with a slightly downward angle or with tight depth of field focus, emphasizing both her strength and the fragility of her augmented body. Symbolic visual contrasts appear frequently, especially between the human characters and the Rev. 9. The Rev. 9 is typically framed from a distance, cold and calculated, moving with mechanical efficiency. His movement through the frame is smooth, eerily graceful, even when committing acts of violence. This contrasts with the more erratic, emotional, and dynamic presence of Grace, Danny, and Sarah. The Rev. 9 rarely shows emotion. His face is usually blank or calm, which is enhanced by the lighting choices, often backlit or silhouetted. He appears more like a shadow or force of nature than a person. His appearances often manipulate light sources, passing through beams of sunlight, flickering security lights, or bursts of fire, reinforcing his role as a destructive, unnatural presence. Camera movement also plays a thematic role. Throughout the film, movement is often used to suggest transition between worlds, between identities, and between past and future. Sweeping shots from ground to sky or across expansive landscapes emphasize the vastness of the conflict and the smallness of the individual within it. Meanwhile, tracking shots in enclosed spaces, like the detention facility or the dam, create a claustrophobic sense of pressure, as though time and space are closing in on the characters. The cargo plane fight sequence is a masterclass in movement, using rotating camera angles to simulate the plane's spiral and the chaos of zero gravity. This moment of disorientation parallels the characters' psychological states as they hurtle toward an uncertain fate. The use of mirrors and reflections adds another visual motif throughout the film. Mirrors are often used during moments of decision or realization. In one scene, Grace looks into a cracked mirror, her reflection fractured, symbolizing her fragmented self, part human, part machine, neither whole. In another moment, Sarah stares into a reflection after receiving coordinates for a new Terminator arrival, her face shadowed and aged, reminding the viewer of her long and painful journey. These reflective moments are not merely stylistic. They reinforce the film's exploration of identity, legacy, and the question of what we see in ourselves when everything else is stripped away. Slow motion is used sparingly, but effectively in key action sequences. When Grace jumps in front of Danny during the initial attack in the factory, time slows to highlight the urgency and the cost of her protection. The soundtrack and sound design of Terminator Dark Fate play an essential and sometimes underappreciated role in immersing the audience into the film's tense, action-packed world. Audio is a crucial storytelling tool in any science fiction action movie, especially in the Terminator franchise, where machines, human vulnerability, and futuristic warfare are central themes. Dark Fate's audio landscape was crafted to honor the auditory legacy of the earlier films while also introducing new textures, rhythms, and innovations that reflect the evolving tone and emotional depth of this installment. The original Terminator films, particularly James Cameron's 1984 classic and its 1991 sequel, were known for their distinctive synth-based scores and heavy, mechanical soundscapes. Brad Fiedel's iconic main theme, built around metallic percussion and minor key melodies, became one of the most recognizable motifs in science fiction cinema. In Terminator Dark Fate, composer Tom Hokenborg, also known as Junkie XL, was tasked with not only reinterpreting this legendary theme but also crafting a new musical identity for the film's fresh characters, new emotional arcs, and more globally conscious setting. Junkie XL brings a modernized, hybrid approach to the score. His soundtrack blends traditional orchestration with digital elements, percussive motifs, and ethnic instruments to reflect the movie's diverse characters and locations. While earlier Terminator scores leaned heavily into electronic and synthetic textures to symbolize the rise of machines, Hokenborg's score for Dark Fate injects more organic, human tones to accompany the personal journeys of Danny, Grace, and Sarah Connor. For instance, some scenes feature the use of guitars, flutes, and even regional Mexican instruments subtly woven into the music. These choices help ground the story in its Mexico-based opening and add cultural flavor that wasn't present in previous installments. The original Terminator theme does make a return in Dark Fate, but it is not used frequently or gratuitously. Instead, Hokenborg chooses to reintroduce the motif sparingly, often in moments of legacy or recognition. One of the most notable uses of the iconic theme occurs in the film's closing sequences, when Danny and Sarah look toward the future, ready to face what's coming. The music swells, and the familiar rhythmic pulse of the original theme is heard in a more subdued, elegiac arrangement. This restrained use of the classic theme ensures that it retains its emotional power and connects the events of Dark Fate to the franchise's larger mythology without relying too heavily on nostalgia. Beyond a score itself, the film's sound design contributes significantly to the intensity, suspense, and emotion of the experience. Sound design in Terminator Dark Fate had to achieve a delicate balance, capturing the visceral chaos of action scenes while also emphasizing the humanity of its characters and the terror of facing an unstoppable foe. The audio team designed a detailed sonic palette for each major element: the Rev. 9, Grace's augmented body, futuristic weaponry, crashes, explosions, and even moments of silence. One of the most impressive aspects of the film's sound design is the auditory characterization of the Rev. 9 Terminator. as a machine capable of splitting into two distinct entities, a liquid metal form and a solid endoskeleton. The Rev-9 required a unique sound identity. When the Rev-9 transitions between forms, the sound is almost insect-like, with clicking, tearing, and stretching metal textures layered together to evoke a disturbing and alien presence. His movement is accompanied by low mechanical rumbles and a subtle but menacing frequency shift that unsettles the viewer. Even when he's not on screen, his presence is often suggested by sound, an ominous hum, the faint echo of metallic footsteps, or a growing pulse of tension in the music. Grace, on the other hand, receives a different sonic treatment. As an augmented human rather than a full machine, her movements are more grounded, but still enhanced with subtle auditory cues. When she engages in combat, the sounds of her punches, movements, and impacts are sharper and more forceful than a normal human's, but less industrial than those of a Terminator. The sound designers gave Grace's body a soft, electric hum that fluctuates depending on her energy level, subtly indicating when she's nearing exhaustion. This not only adds a layer of realism but also builds empathy, reminding the audience that Grace, despite her enhancements, is still vulnerable. The sound of futuristic technology also needed to strike a careful balance between imagination and believability. The Rev-9's morphing ability, futuristic weapons, and the time displacement device all required creative audio inventions. The time displacement sequences use layered soundscapes that begin with low, slow pulses and build to a crescendo of high-pitched tones and distortion, suggesting a ripping or warping of time and space. These moments are accompanied by a distinctive, rhythmic pulsing sound reminiscent of a mechanical heartbeat, tying them to the franchise's iconic themes of machines and destiny. Another standout area of the film's sound design is its use of environmental audio to enhance immersion. From the bustling streets of Mexico City to the empty corridors of the detention center, the sound team carefully layered background noises, ambient effects, and natural acoustics to ground each scene. In the early sequences, the warmth and vibrancy of Danny's world are reinforced by the chatter of street vendors, the rumble of distant traffic, and the sounds of daily life. When that world is shattered by the arrival of the Rev-9, the abrupt change in the sonic environment makes the intrusion feel even more violent. During action scenes, the mixing of sound is particularly crucial. In many high-octane sequences, such as the freeway chase, the airborne cargo plane battle, and the climactic hydroelectric dam fight, the audio balance between explosions, dialogue, music, and environmental sounds had to be finely tuned. Sound editors ensured that important narrative beats and character reactions were never drowned out by chaos. Explosions are thunderous but short. Bullets ricochet with distinct pitches. Screams and grunts cut through the mix to preserve human emotion in the midst of destruction. In quiet moments, the absence of sound becomes just as powerful as its presence. Scenes of reflection or grief, such as when Grace reveals her mission to Danny or when Sarah talks about the loss of her son, are underscored by near silence or minimal ambient sound, allowing the viewer to focus on the characters' voices and the emotional weight of their words. This restrained use of audio is a deliberate technique that gives the film a more serious and intimate tone, differentiating it from many other action blockbusters that rely on constant auditory stimulation. Terminator Dark Fate, released in 2019, arrived in theaters with a significant amount of anticipation and pressure. Positioned as a direct sequel to Terminator 2 Judgment Day and ignoring the continuity of the films that followed it, the movie was marketed as a return to form for the beloved science fiction franchise. James Cameron, the original creator, returned in a producing and story capacity, and the reintroduction of Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor added a nostalgic pull for longtime fans. However, the film's reception proved to be complex, divisive, and ultimately reflective of the broader challenges facing legacy franchises in modern cinema. Upon release, critical response to Dark Fate was mixed to positive. Many reviewers appreciated the attempt to re-establish the franchise's core elements: high-stakes action, human versus machine conflict, and strong female leads. The return of Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor was widely praised, with critics commending her performance as raw, emotionally grounded, and fiercely commanding. Her presence was seen as essential in grounding the film in the emotional realism that made Judgment Day so impactful. Her portrayal of a hardened, grief-stricken warrior added dramatic weight to a film otherwise filled with high-speed chases and explosive battles. Arnold Schwarzenegger's return as a Terminator, this time an aged T-800 who has developed a conscience and a family, received mixed reactions. Some found the character's arc to be a bold and intriguing exploration of identity and redemption. Others considered it a tonal misstep, feeling that the film leaned too heavily into self-aware humor, especially in scenes where the Terminator discusses interior design or his role as a surrogate father figure. While Schwarzenegger's performance was generally appreciated, his character's evolution divided audiences. Newcomers to the franchise, particularly Mackenzie Davis as Grace and Natalia Reyes as Danny Ramos, also received varied responses. Davis was widely applauded for her physicality and emotional intensity. Many critics cited her performance as one of the film's highlights, portraying Grace as a tragic hero, augmented, powerful, but still deeply human. Reyes as Danny was seen by some as a fresh face with potential, though others argued that the film did not give her enough character development early on to fully engage the audience in her journey. Still, her transformation into a future leader was viewed as a clear attempt by the filmmakers to pass the torch to a new generation. On the technical side, the film's action sequences and special effects were mostly praised. The freeway chase, in particular, was highlighted for its choreography and high tension. The Rev. 9, the film's new Terminator villain, was lauded for its terrifying dual-form design and relentless menace. However, some critics noted that the digital effects in certain scenes, especially those involving water or de-aging, did not meet the visual standards set by contemporary blockbusters. Despite these strengths, a common critique of Dark Fate centered on its lack of originality. Several reviewers argued that the film essentially rehashed the plot structure of the original two Terminator films. A protector is sent back in time to save a future leader from a nearly unstoppable machine assassin. While the new characters and updated themes offered a fresh twist, the overall narrative arc was seen as derivative by some. There was also concern that the film leaned too heavily on nostalgia, relying on familiar lines, musical cues, and callbacks without offering enough innovation to justify its existence. Audience reception mirrored the critical division. Longtime fans of the franchise were split. Some embraced the film as a worthy continuation that righted the wrongs of previous sequels like Terminator Genesis and Terminator Salvation. They appreciated the emotional depth brought back by Linda Hamilton's return, the effort to tell a more personal story, and the return to an R rating, allowing for grittier and more intense action sequences. Others, however, were frustrated by certain creative decisions, particularly the early death of John Connor. In the film's opening sequence, John is killed by a rogue Terminator shortly after the events of Judgment Day. This moment was controversial, as it effectively nullified the emotional payoff of the first two films and alienated fans who saw John Connor as the heart of the franchise. The decision to make Danny the new savior of humanity also sparked debate. While many praised the film for diversifying its lead characters and introducing a Latina protagonist, others felt the transition was not earned narratively. Some audiences viewed the shift as politically motivated or overly agenda-driven, though many critics dismissed these complaints as reactionary and missing the thematic intent of the film. The filmmakers made it clear that Dark Fate aimed to reflect the global and multicultural reality of the modern world, and Danny's role was a deliberate move to create a new kind of hero for a new generation. Box office performance added another layer of complexity to the film's reception. Despite a production budget reportedly exceeding $180 million and a major marketing campaign, Dark Fate underperformed financially. It earned approximately $261 million worldwide, falling short of expectations and making it one of the franchise's lowest-grossing entries relative to its cost. This commercial disappointment cast doubt on the future of the series and led to the shelving of planned sequels that would have continued Danny's story and explored the origins of Grace's timeline. Several factors were cited in analyses of the box office failure. Franchise fatigue played a significant role. After multiple reboots, timeline shifts, and inconsistent sequels, many casual viewers had lost interest or were confused by the film's place in the overall continuity. Additionally, the crowded release schedule of 2019, which included major blockbusters like Joker and Frozen 2, may have siphoned attention away from Dark Fate. There is also speculation that the marketing campaign failed to effectively convey the movie's significance or differentiate it from previous Terminator entries. In terms of accolades, Terminator Dark Fate received relatively few major awards or nominations. It was recognized for its visual effects and stunt work by some guilds and associations, but did not receive attention from major institutions like the Oscars or Golden Globes. This lack of awards recognition further underlined the perception that, while technically competent and emotionally resonant in parts, the film did not break new cinematic ground. In retrospective critiques and think pieces, some analysts have reevaluated the film more favorably. They point to its strong female leads, nuanced performances, and willingness to tackle themes like grief, legacy, and destiny with sincerity. The relationship between Sarah, Grace, and Danny is often highlighted as a compelling emotional core, showcasing intergenerational female strength in a genre traditionally dominated by male protagonists. For some, the film represents a valuable, if flawed, attempt to evolve the franchise into something more modern, inclusive, and character-driven. Terminator Dark Fate occupies a unique and somewhat paradoxical place in the history of science fiction cinema. Although the film was positioned as a franchise reboot with the potential to launch a new trilogy, its modest box office results and divided audience response curtailed that ambition. However, Dark Fate's legacy and influence extend beyond financial performance. The film contributed to broader cultural discussions, pushed the genre in meaningful directions, and made specific choices that continue to influence how franchises handle legacy characters, new protagonists, and evolving narratives in an increasingly interconnected entertainment landscape. At the core of Dark Fate's legacy is its role in attempting to bridge generations. By bringing back original cast members such as Linda Hamilton and Arnold Schwarzenegger, the film offered a direct line back to the roots of the franchise. This move was not merely nostalgic, it was strategic. In the modern era of cinematic universes and rebooted properties, legacy characters are often used as symbolic touchstones to ease audiences into new timelines or faces. Dark Fate followed this model, placing older versions of Sarah Connor and the T-800 alongside newcomers Grace and Danny Ramos. This multi-generational ensemble set the template for similar films that would attempt to mix old and new, such as Ghostbusters Afterlife or the Star Wars sequel trilogy. The film also contributed to the growing trend of legacy sequels, a term used to describe films that directly continue a beloved story while ignoring less successful follow-ups. By acting as a direct continuation of Terminator 2, Judgment Day, Dark Fate effectively erased Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines, Terminator Salvation, and Terminator Genisys from its continuity. This strategy, while initially confusing to casual viewers, allowed the film to recenter its narrative and emotional weight on what made the franchise compelling in the first place. This approach has since become more common in Hollywood, with creators opting to revisit and course-correct properties rather than adhere strictly to previous, often convoluted, storylines. From a narrative standpoint, Dark Fate made a controversial yet bold choice in killing off John Connor at the very beginning of the film. This decision shifted the franchise's thematic focus from one chosen savior to the idea that resistance and heroism can emerge from anyone, anywhere, especially those who might otherwise be overlooked. This narrative reframing opened the door for Danny Ramos to take center stage and represent a new kind of leader, one who is young, female, and Latina. While this choice faced backlash from some fans of the original films, it also signaled a commitment to diversifying genre storytelling. The influence of this decision can be seen in the increasing number of action and science fiction films that center on female protagonists of color, challenging long-standing conventions about who can lead a franchise. The casting of Mackenzie Davis as Grace also left a lasting impression. Her character was not only physically formidable but emotionally complex, a rare combination in action cinema. Grace's portrayal as a soldier altered by technology to serve humanity added nuance to the traditional protector role. She was not a machine, nor a savior, but someone caught in between, sacrificing her health, future, and ultimately her life for a cause greater than herself. Her story helped push science fiction further into exploring hybrid identities and moral gray areas, influencing other media that grapples with questions of human augmentation, post-humanism, and autonomy in a tech-saturated world. The visual and action design of the film also contributed to its influence. The Rev. 9, portrayed by Gabriel Luna, introduced a new kind of Terminator, a fusion of liquid metal and endoskeleton capable of separating into two independent killing machines. This design not only upped the ante in terms of threat level but also reimagined how enemies in action films can function. The choreography and visual style of the Rev 9's movements influenced future depictions of sci-fi antagonists in television and film, where more fluid, unpredictable, and shape-shifting villains are becoming increasingly common. The Rev 9's brutal efficiency and adaptive combat style have been compared to recent antagonists in shows like The Mandalorian and films like Venom. Another subtle but enduring influence of Dark Fate is its commentary on automation, surveillance, and artificial intelligence. While these themes have always been at the heart of the Terminator series, Dark Fate recontextualized them in a more contemporary framework. By introducing Legion as the new apocalyptic AI, different from Skynet but born from similar ambitions, the film made a point that technological doom is not the result of a single entity, but a recurring human impulse. This concept has resonated in other stories that portray the inevitability of certain technological dangers, regardless of attempts to prevent them. It serves as a warning that the underlying systems enabling AI advancement may always lead to similar conclusions if unchecked. In terms of influence on representation, Dark Fate's depiction of a Latina lead character in a major science fiction franchise was a landmark moment. Hollywood has long struggled with Latino representation, especially in genre films. While Natalia Reyes' character, Dani, may not have become as iconic as John Connor or Sarah Connor, her role was nevertheless significant in signaling a shift in casting and character development. The presence of Mexican settings, Spanish-language dialogue, and a narrative deeply tied to border politics also hinted at a desire to tell stories that reflect real-world socio-political concerns through a genre lens. Subsequent films and series have taken similar steps to anchor science fiction and fantasy narratives in more globally conscious storytelling. Despite its commercial failure, Terminator Dark Fate has earned a reputation over time as an underappreciated installment in the franchise. Some fans and critics have revisited the film and found renewed appreciation for its emotional core, particularly the dynamic between Sarah Connor, Grace, and Dani. This trio represents 3 generations of women, each dealing with trauma, leadership, and sacrifice in different ways. Their interactions, challenges, and alliances form the emotional backbone of the movie, setting it apart from more bombastic but emotionally hollow action films. This focus on character-driven storytelling has influenced other filmmakers seeking to balance action with genuine emotional arcs. The film's attempt to close the chapter on older characters while setting up a new lineage has also been influential. While the planned sequels were canceled after Dark Fate's box office performance, the structure it introduced, a passing of the torch with thematic closure, has since been mirrored in other properties. Whether it's Indiana Jones, Star Wars, or even superhero franchises, the concept of legacy characters making way for newer generations is now common. Terminator Dark Fate contributed to refining this narrative approach, even if its own continuation was cut short. Terminator Dark Fate sparked a wide range of reactions from audiences around the world, largely due to its attempt to balance nostalgia with innovation and to introduce new characters and themes while maintaining connections to the earlier, beloved entries in the franchise. While critics and industry insiders often focus on box office metrics and technical execution, what truly shapes a film's legacy over time is how it resonates with people on an emotional and personal level. With Dark Fate, this resonance was deeply mixed, revealing generational divides, evolving expectations, and shifting cultural values in how stories are consumed and interpreted. For older fans who had grown up with the original 1984 Terminator and its critically acclaimed sequel, Terminator 2, Judgment Day, the return of Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor was seen as a momentous and emotional event. Many longtime fans reflected positively on her presence, praising the film's willingness to show an aging female hero who is hardened by loss but not broken. Her raw portrayal of grief, determination, and cynicism resonated with viewers who themselves had aged alongside the franchise. These fans often expressed feelings of validation and gratitude that Sarah was given the spotlight again, not as a side character or mere mentor, but as a central force in the narrative. They saw her as a reflection of real-world women who continue to fight battles in their personal or professional lives, even as the world around them changes. Younger audiences, particularly those unfamiliar with the Terminator legacy, approach the film with different expectations. For them, the new characters such as Grace and Danny offered fresh perspectives and emotional stakes that were not reliant on nostalgia. Grace, a super-enhanced soldier from the future, was seen as both fierce and vulnerable, and her self-sacrificing nature struck a chord with viewers who value themes of personal loyalty and honor. Danny Ramos, an ordinary young woman thrown into extraordinary circumstances, inspired discussions about agency, destiny, and the power of choice. Audiences who connected with Danny's arc often reflected on how leadership and strength can emerge in unexpected ways, and how anyone, regardless of background, can rise to meet a greater purpose. However, the film's decision to kill off John Connor within the first few minutes polarized its viewers. For many, especially those emotionally invested in the original timeline, this move felt like a betrayal. John had been portrayed for decades as the symbolic savior of humanity, and his sudden removal was seen by some as a dismissal of the franchise's core mythology. Audience interpretations varied widely. Some appreciated the bold narrative shift, seeing it as a way to free the story from overused tropes and to emphasize that no one person determines the fate of the world. Others felt disoriented and alienated, arguing that such a drastic change undermined the emotional payoff of the earlier films. This decision sparked online debates, with fans writing essays, producing videos, and engaging in forum discussions to dissect whether the choice was justified or misguided. The depiction of Danny Ramos as the new resistance leader was another point of reflection. Many audience members, especially within Latino communities, responded positively to seeing a Mexican woman take the lead in a major sci-fi film. They commented on how rare such representation had been in the genre and expressed pride in seeing a protagonist who looked like them and came from their cultural background. This visibility mattered to audiences who felt overlooked by mainstream Hollywood narratives. Danny's journey from a factory worker in Mexico City to the future leader of a resistance movement was interpreted as a metaphor for resilience, adaptability, and self-belief. Some viewers saw parallels to immigrant narratives, noting how Danny's struggle for survival and leadership reflected broader themes of migration, transformation, and empowerment. On the other hand, there were segments of the audience that viewed the film's emphasis on female empowerment and diversity as forced or politically motivated. This interpretation, often voiced in online comment sections or social media posts, suggested that Dark Fate was pandering or prioritizing message over storytelling. While some of these criticisms were rooted in genuine concerns about character development or narrative coherence, others reflected deeper cultural tensions around changing norms in media representation. The very fact that these debates occurred speaks to the way Dark Fate touched on sensitive and evolving issues in popular culture, issues about who gets to be a hero, what stories get told, and how identity shapes narrative. Another frequent interpretation from audiences centered on the film's themes of inevitability and repetition. The revelation that Skynet was not the only possible artificial intelligence to bring about humanity's doom struck many viewers as a sobering commentary on human nature. Legion, the new AI antagonist, emerged not as a sequel to Skynet, but as a completely separate development, suggesting that the danger lies not in one particular system but in humanity's relentless pursuit of control through technology. Audiences reflected on this idea in light of real-world developments in surveillance, AI, and automation. Many noted that the film's message felt more relevant than ever, especially as society grapples with issues like facial recognition, data privacy, and autonomous weapons. Viewers interpreted this as a warning that without introspection and restraint, the same mistakes will be repeated, even with different tools and names. The emotional core of the film also led audiences to reflect on themes of grief, redemption, and purpose. Sarah Connor's bitterness, born from decades of loss and trauma, resonated with those who had experienced similar emotions in their own lives. The T-800, now calling himself Carl, offered a surprising take on guilt and change. Audiences were divided on his role. Some felt it was strange or inconsistent, while others saw it as a moving portrayal of a machine trying to find meaning after completing a horrific mission. His attempt to become part of a family, his empathy, and his final act of sacrifice prompted emotional responses from viewers who interpreted his arc as a metaphor for redemption, atonement, and the possibility of change, even for those once deemed incapable of it. There were also reflections on how the film dealt with the idea of choice versus destiny. Fans debated whether the film successfully communicated its new message, that no fate is written and that anyone can be a leader, not because of a prophecy, but because of who they choose to become. Some felt that this message was empowering, breaking free from the deterministic undertones of earlier films. Others thought it muddled the thematic clarity of the series. However, most agreed that the film invited audiences to reconsider long-held beliefs about fate, legacy, and personal agency. Terminator Dark Fate presents a rich tapestry of character development that centers primarily around its three leading women, Sarah Connor, Grace, and Dani Ramos. Each character is carefully constructed with a distinct arc that explores themes of trauma, redemption, agency, and transformation. Their journeys intertwine to create a multi-layered narrative that challenges traditional action movie tropes by emphasizing emotional depth and complex relationships alongside physical conflict. Understanding these character arcs reveals much about the film's intentions, its emotional core, and how it attempts to redefine the Terminator franchise for a new generation. Sarah Connor's arc is one of resilience, grief, and tentative hope. Returning after nearly 3 decades, she is no longer the rebellious young woman of the original films, but a battle-hardened survivor scarred by loss. The murder of John Connor early in the film becomes the defining trauma of her life. This loss pushes Sarah into a life of solitary vigilance and bitterness, illustrated by her relentless pursuit of the Rev. 9 Terminator. Sarah's motivations are fueled by guilt and an unrelenting sense of duty to protect humanity, even if it means isolating herself emotionally. Throughout the film, her arc reveals a tension between vengeance and the possibility of moving forward. The moments where Sarah begins to connect with Dani and Grace indicate a slow, cautious opening of her heart, suggesting that despite her hardened exterior, she retains a capacity for hope and alliance. Grace's arc functions as a poignant exploration of sacrifice, identity, and what it means to be human in a technologically altered body. As a soldier enhanced with cybernetic augmentations, Grace exists in a liminal space between human and machine. Her physical prowess and combat skills set her apart, but the film invests in showing her vulnerabilities, especially the toll that her enhancements take on her body and spirit. Grace's mission is clear: to protect Dani at all costs. However, the emotional weight of this mission is felt deeply, as Grace's limited lifespan due to her augmentations mirrors a ticking clock. Her arc embodies selflessness, courage, and the struggle to maintain one's humanity while being part machine. Her gradual bond with Dani evolves from protector and ward to comrades in arms, and her ultimate sacrifice marks the emotional climax of her development. Grace's journey challenges audiences to consider themes of mortality, legacy, and the cost of fighting for a cause greater than oneself. Dani Ramos, as the new central figure in the franchise, undergoes a classic hero's journey that is complicated by her ordinary origins and sudden thrust into extraordinary circumstances. At the film's start, Dani is a young woman working in a factory in Mexico City, living an unremarkable life. The trauma of losing family members to the Rev. 9 propels her into a role she neither asked for nor was prepared to handle. Throughout the film, Danny transitions from terrified survivor to proactive leader. This transformation is marked by moments of doubt, fear, and anger, balanced by courage, resilience, and emerging confidence. Danny's arc is crucial because it redefines what heroism means within the Terminator mythos. Unlike John Connor, who is portrayed as a destined savior, Danny's heroism is rooted in choice and perseverance, reinforcing the film's message that no fate is sealed. Her character is also important culturally, symbolizing new voices and identities rising in a traditionally white male-dominated genre. The dynamic between these three women forms the emotional heart of the story. Sarah's bitterness and experience contrast with Danny's youthful uncertainty and Grace's weary determination. Together, they embody different responses to trauma and responsibility. The interactions between Sarah and Danny, in particular, mirror a mentor-protege relationship, but are complicated by generational differences and the shadow of John Connor's legacy. Grace acts as a bridge, connecting the two by embodying both the future and the costs of fighting. This triad's evolving relationship is a refreshing departure from the lone hero trope common in action films, emphasizing community, shared purpose, and solidarity. Arnold Schwarzenegger's character, now calling himself Carl, offers an intriguing secondary arc that explores themes of redemption, memory, and identity. Carl is a T-800 Terminator reprogrammed to protect humanity and now attempting to live a semblance of a normal life. His character reflects on the possibility of change, even for a machine originally built to kill. Throughout the film, Carl struggles with guilt over his past actions, especially the death of John Connor, and desires connection and forgiveness. His efforts to integrate into human society, such as working a mundane job and forming a makeshift family, add a layer of humanity rarely afforded to cyborg characters in the franchise. Carl's arc culminates in a sacrificial act, underlining his transformation from an instrument of destruction to a figure of redemption and loyalty. This complexity adds emotional weight to the film and offers a meditation on whether identity is determined by origin or by choices. The antagonist, the Rev 9, also has a form of character development, though in a more abstract sense. Unlike previous Terminators, the Rev 9 is a highly advanced hybrid model capable of separating into two independent units, one liquid metal and one solid endoskeleton. While the Rev 9 lacks emotional complexity, its relentless pursuit of Danny reflects an unyielding, almost primal determination. This creates a stark contrast to the human character's struggles with morality and choice. The Rev 9's adaptability and duality symbolize the ever-evolving nature of technological threats, emphasizing that the challenges faced by humanity are no longer straightforward. The character functions as a nearly unstoppable force of nature, representing the cold logic of artificial intelligence devoid of empathy. Its presence heightens tension and stakes throughout the narrative, pushing the protagonists to their limits. Minor characters, such as Manuel, Danny's uncle, also serve critical roles in character development and thematic resonance. Manuel provides a grounded human perspective and a familial connection for Danny, anchoring her in a tangible world outside the science fiction conflict. His protective instincts and everyday wisdom contrast with the high-stakes battle for humanity's future. Manuel's interactions with Danny help highlight her growth from vulnerability to assertiveness, emphasizing the importance of community and family support in personal transformation. The evolving relationships between characters are further enriched by the film's exploration of trust and betrayal. Danny initially distrusts both Grace and Sarah, uncertain of their motives and capabilities. As the story unfolds, trust is built through shared experiences, sacrifices, and revelations. The development of this trust mirrors real-world dynamics of alliance and coalition building under duress, reflecting the film's broader themes of unity against a common threat. Terminator Dark Fate's costume and set design play critical roles in establishing the film's tone, advancing its narrative, and reflecting the identities and journeys of its characters. These visual elements work in harmony with the story to create a believable and immersive world that bridges the futuristic sci-fi elements with grounded human experiences. The filmmaker's deliberate choices in clothing, makeup, and environment design contribute not only to character development but also to the thematic resonance of the film. Starting with costumes, the film uses wardrobe to differentiate characters' backgrounds, personalities, and transformations. Sarah Connor's costumes emphasize her hardened, battle-ready status. She is typically clad in practical, utilitarian clothing, dark tactical gear, worn leather jackets, and combat boots that reflect her survivalist mentality and decades of combat experience. Her clothing lacks ornamentation or flair, emphasizing functionality over style and symbolizing the emotional armor she wears after years of trauma. The weathered nature of her outfits, often dirted or torn, visually communicates her relentless struggle against relentless threats. Sarah's look also serves as a nod to her iconic appearance in Terminator 2, but with a more rugged, weathered edge, signaling her evolution into a seasoned warrior shaped by loss and hardship. Grace's costume design cleverly blends futuristic and militaristic elements, highlighting her hybrid human-cybernetic nature. Her clothing incorporates advanced tactical armor and sleek, form-fitting materials that suggest enhanced mobility and protection, fitting for her super soldier status. Subtle metallic accents and synthetic textures hint at her cybernetic enhancements, without overpowering her humanity. The costume design balances Grace's vulnerability and power, visually reinforcing the tension between her human emotions and her augmented body. This careful integration of the practical and the futuristic distinguishes her from traditional soldiers or cyborg characters and deepens her unique role in the narrative. Dani Ramos's wardrobe contrasts sharply with Sarah's and Grace's, underscoring her initial ordinariness and grounded life before the chaos begins. She wears casual, everyday clothing typical of a young factory worker, comfortable jeans, simple tops, and light jackets that emphasize her youth, relatability, and cultural roots. Her clothes are practical yet unremarkable, signaling her status as an every-woman protagonist who is suddenly thrust into extraordinary circumstances. As the film progresses, Dani's outfits become more tactical and battle-ready, mirroring her transformation from an uncertain civilian into a confident leader. This gradual shift in wardrobe visually maps her character arc and growing agency. Arnold Schwarzenegger's character, Carl, reflects an unusual blend of his machine origins and his attempt to assimilate into normal life. His clothing choices are deliberately mundane, usually work shirts, casual jackets, and jeans, to suggest a desire for anonymity and normalcy. This contrast between his ordinary attire and his extraordinary past serves as a visual metaphor for the internal conflict between machine and man. His attire also grounds him in the present-day world, allowing audiences to connect with him as a character attempting to redefine his identity. The Rev. 9 Terminator's appearance relies less on traditional costume and more on its design as an advanced technological threat. Its sleek, black endoskeleton and liquid metal form communicate cold efficiency and lethal adaptability. The minimalistic, almost organic design of the Rev. 9 emphasizes its inhumanity and the evolution of Terminator technology, creating a stark visual contrast with the human characters. Its form is both menacing and fascinating, and the fluidity of the liquid metal segments is highlighted through special effects rather than costume, reinforcing the character's unique abilities. Makeup and prosthetics are also used effectively to support the film's narrative and character portrayal. Sarah Connor's look includes subtle aging makeup that conveys her years of hardship and battle scars, adding realism and emotional weight to her character. Grace's augmented body required complex prosthetic work to visually represent the cybernetic enhancements and injuries she sustains throughout the film, including mechanical elements beneath torn flesh and skin. These effects serve to remind audiences of the physical cost of her enhancements and her mortality despite her superhuman abilities. The Rev 9's liquid metal form blends seamlessly with computer-generated imagery, but practical effects and makeup augment its encounters with humans, enhancing believability. Moving on to set design, Terminator Dark Fate utilizes a blend of real-world locations and carefully constructed sets to create environments that feel both familiar and menacingly transformed by the looming presence of advanced technology and conflict. The film opens in Mexico City, showcasing urban environments that feel lived in and authentic, grounding the story in a specific cultural and geographical context. The city's crowded streets, factories, and homes are detailed with local color and texture, making the world more immersive and relatable. This emphasis on place is significant as it situates a traditionally North American sci-fi narrative within a broader global context, reflecting the film's diverse characters and themes. The factory setting, where Danny works, is designed with a gritty, industrial aesthetic that emphasizes the stark realities of her life before the inciting events. The claustrophobic spaces, harsh lighting, and mechanical sounds immerse the audience in a world of labor and routine, contrasting sharply with the high-tech battles that follow. This grounded environment enhances the stakes of Danny's journey by rooting her origins in an environment recognizable to many viewers, further emphasizing her transformation. As the film progresses, the settings shift to include more action-oriented locales, abandoned highways, desert highways, and rural areas, each designed to accommodate dynamic chase sequences and combat scenes. These locations are designed to feel expansive and vulnerable, underscoring the protagonist's isolation and the relentless pursuit by the Rev. 9. The wide-open spaces also serve as visual metaphors for freedom and danger, reinforcing themes of escape and confrontation. Interior sets, such as safe houses and temporary hideouts, are designed to feel utilitarian and functional rather than comfortable, emphasizing the character's transient and precarious situations. The use of muted colors and minimal decoration in these spaces reflects the tension and urgency permeating the story. These settings also highlight the contrast between moments of relative safety and imminent threat, keeping audiences engaged and emotionally invested. Terminator Dark Fate's dialogue and scriptwriting represent a deliberate effort to balance character-driven moments with high-stakes action, while also honoring the franchise's legacy and updating it for modern audiences. The screenplay, crafted to deliver both exposition and emotional resonance, weaves together complex character dynamics, thematic depth, and thrilling set pieces. Understanding the strengths and weaknesses of the dialogue and script offers insight into how the film attempts to engage viewers through words as well as visuals. One of the defining characteristics of the script is its attempt to humanize the characters through naturalistic and emotionally charged dialogue. The interactions between Sarah Connor, Grace, and Danny Ramos are often grounded in personal stakes, trauma, and trust building, rather than pure action or exposition. These moments allow the audience to connect with the characters on a deeper level. For instance, Sarah's terse and guarded conversations reflect her hardened worldview and pain, while Grace's dialogue reveals a mix of determination and vulnerability. Danny's lines evolve from uncertainty and fear to courage and leadership, mirroring her character development. The script's approach to dialogue often emphasizes brevity and efficiency during action sequences, with quick exchanges that heighten tension and keep pacing brisk. This style prevents the film from bogging down in excessive explanation, letting physical storytelling and visual effects drive much of the excitement. However, these rapid-fire moments are balanced with slower, more reflective scenes that allow characters to express their motivations and fears. This dynamic pacing helps maintain audience engagement by shifting between adrenaline-pumping sequences and emotional depth. Memorable lines in the film serve multiple purposes. Some provide callbacks to earlier installments in the Terminator franchise, evoking nostalgia and continuity, while others encapsulate the film's core themes. For example, the repeated phrase, "No fate but what we make," serves as a thematic anchor, reinforcing the film's emphasis on choice and agency in the face of seemingly predetermined futures. Such lines resonate beyond their immediate context, inviting audiences to reflect on broader ideas about destiny and self-determination. Humor is sparingly but effectively used in the script to provide relief from the film's intense and often dark tone. Arnold Schwarzenegger's Carl delivers several moments of dry wit and self-aware humor, offering a subtle levity that contrasts with the high stakes of the story. This humor helps humanize Carl, softening his machine persona and making him more relatable. The script avoids heavy-handed comedic relief, opting instead for brief, situational humor that arises naturally from character interactions or ironic circumstances. Exposition, a challenge in any sci-fi film with complex lore, is handled with mixed success. The screenplay uses dialogue-driven explanations to update new viewers on the status of the Terminator universe, the nature of the new Rev 9 antagonist, and the motivations behind the characters' actions. These expository moments are often delivered through conversations between characters unfamiliar with each other, such as Sarah explaining past events to Danny. While necessary, some of these exchanges feel slightly forced or overly didactic, occasionally interrupting the narrative flow. Nevertheless, the script strives to keep exposition concise and relevant, avoiding long monologues or technical jargon that might alienate viewers. The pacing of conversations is generally well-calibrated, with dialogue scenes interspersed between action set pieces to provide breathing room and character development. The screenplay uses pauses, interruptions, and shifting emotional tones within conversations to build tension or intimacy. For example, scenes where trust is tested between the protagonists often feature clipped, guarded exchanges that gradually soften as bonds form. These subtle shifts in dialogue tone enhance the realism and emotional impact of character relationships. The script also employs a variety of dialogue styles depending on context and character. Sarah Connor's speech is often terse, blunt, and laden with emotional weight, reflecting years of trauma and focus on survival. Grace's dialogue combines military precision with moments of hesitation, highlighting her dual nature as a soldier and augmented human. Danny's lines range from hesitant and questioning early in the film to assertive and inspiring as she embraces her role. These distinct voices contribute to the film's character differentiation and help convey internal states without explicit exposition. In terms of building tension, the screenplay uses dialogue to heighten stakes and deepen conflicts. Confrontations between protagonists and antagonists are marked by terse, threatening exchanges that underscore the deadly nature of the Rev 9 and the urgency of the mission. These verbal battles often precede or follow physical confrontations, adding psychological layers to the conflict. The Rev 9 silence or minimal speech further enhances its menace, contrasting with the more verbose human characters and underscoring its inhumanity. The script also touches on themes of legacy and responsibility through dialogue, especially in moments where Sarah and Carl reflect on John Connor's death and what it means for the future. These conversations are often weighted with regret and hope, conveying the emotional stakes that drive the characters. The dialogue in these scenes is carefully crafted to avoid melodrama, instead opting for a restrained tone that feels authentic to the characters' experiences. One criticism of the screenplay involves some of the supporting characters who receive less dialogue and development, leading to moments where their contributions feel underexplored. While the main trio of Sarah, Grace, and Danny benefit from nuanced writing, secondary characters like Manuel or other minor figures often have more functional or expositional lines. This imbalance can sometimes limit the richness of the world building and reduce emotional complexity in group scenes. Overall, the scriptwriting in Terminator Dark Fate walks a tightrope between honoring the franchise's legacy and modernizing its narrative style. It succeeds in delivering emotionally resonant dialogue that deepens character relationships and thematic content. The screenplay's incorporation of memorable lines, thematic phrases, and naturalistic conversations strengthens audience engagement beyond the action. Its pacing and varied dialogue styles contribute to a dynamic and accessible storytelling experience. However, occasional moments of heavy exposition and underdeveloped supporting characters show the challenges of balancing complex sci-fi concepts with character-driven drama. Despite these issues, the screenplay remains a vital component of the film's identity, providing structure, emotional depth, and a voice to the characters as they navigate the high-stakes battle between humanity and machine. Terminator Dark Fate's marketing and promotion campaign was a multifaceted effort aimed at reinvigorating a beloved franchise while attracting both longtime fans and new audiences. Balancing nostalgia with innovation, the campaign sought to highlight the film's connection to earlier Terminator entries, especially Terminator 2, while emphasizing the fresh characters, new technology, and contemporary themes that defined this latest installment. The marketing strategies incorporated traditional media, digital platforms, and immersive experiences to maximize reach and generate excitement ahead of the film's release. Trailers and teasers formed the backbone of the promotional campaign, strategically released over several months to build anticipation. The initial teaser trailer leaned heavily on nostalgic elements, prominently featuring Sarah Connor and Arnold Schwarzenegger reprising their iconic roles, as well as classic lines and music reminiscent of the franchise's heyday. These elements served to reassure fans that the film respected its roots while promising a new direction. Subsequent trailers gradually introduced new characters such as Grace and Danny Ramos, showcasing their roles and abilities through dynamic action sequences. The pacing of trailer reveals was carefully timed to maintain audience interest, gradually expanding the narrative scope without spoiling key plot points. The trailers emphasized the film's high-octane action scenes and groundbreaking visual effects, using fast cuts and intense music to convey urgency and spectacle. However, they also included quieter moments to hint at emotional stakes and character dynamics. This balanced approach helped broaden the appeal beyond action enthusiasts to include viewers seeking a more layered story. Key phrases from the film, especially "no fate but what we make," were used repeatedly in trailers, posters, and social media to reinforce the movie's central theme and create memorable marketing hooks. The tagline became a rallying cry, used in promotional graphics and merchandise, connecting fans to the film's message of empowerment and resistance against predetermined destiny. Posters and print advertising leveraged bold, striking imagery to create visual impact. The most prominent poster featured Sarah Connor and the new protagonists standing strong against the looming shadow of the Rev. 9 Terminator. The use of contrasting colors, with warm tones highlighting the heroes and cold metallic hues representing the antagonist, visually communicated the film's core conflict. Posters were distributed widely in theaters, urban centers, and on billboards to ensure high visibility. Social media campaigns played a vital role in marketing, targeting a younger, digitally savvy audience. Official accounts for the film shared behind-the-scenes photos, character introductions, exclusive video clips, and interactive content such as quizzes and fan challenges. Hashtag campaigns encouraged fans to share their excitement and theories about the film, creating organic buzz and community engagement. Social media influencers and Terminator fans were also tapped to generate grassroots enthusiasm through reviews, discussions, and fan art. Merchandising was another significant aspect of the promotional strategy. A range of collectibles, action figures, apparel, and posters were released in conjunction with the film. Special edition items, such as limited-run Terminator statues and replica props, appealed to hardcore collectors and enthusiasts. Some merchandise incorporated augmented reality features, allowing fans to interact digitally with characters or scenes from the movie, blending physical and digital experiences. Premieres and fan events were carefully orchestrated to maximize media coverage and fan engagement. Red carpet events featured appearances by the main cast and director, generating photo opportunities and interviews that fed into news cycles and entertainment media. Special fan screenings and panel discussions at conventions such as San Diego Comic-Con allowed audiences to connect directly with the filmmakers and stars, deepening interest and loyalty. Unique promotional partnerships further expanded the film's reach. Collaborations with gaming companies produced Terminator-themed game content and downloadable skins that tied into the movie's characters and storyline. Branded promotions with fast food chains, retail stores, and technology companies offered exclusive items and cross-promotional discounts, broadening awareness beyond traditional moviegoers. In the weeks leading up to the release, a strategic rollout of exclusive clips, cast interviews, and director commentary kept the conversation alive in entertainment media. Late-night talk show appearances and podcasts featured cast members discussing their experiences, offering personal insights that humanized the production and built emotional connections with potential viewers. The marketing campaign also carefully navigated challenges unique to a franchise reboot. Balancing respect for longtime fans with the need to appeal to new audiences required messaging that emphasized both legacy and innovation. Promotional materials highlighted the return of beloved characters while introducing new protagonists to signal that the story was evolving. This approach sought to mitigate franchise fatigue and skepticism about yet another Terminator film. Digital marketing data was actively monitored to adjust campaign strategies in real time, optimizing content delivery based on audience engagement metrics and social media trends. Targeted advertisements on platforms like YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook ensured that trailers and promotional content reached demographics most likely to attend theaters. International marketing efforts reflected the global fanbase of the Terminator franchise. Trailers and posters were localized for various markets, and the cast participated in international press tours and fan events. This worldwide approach expanded the film's visibility and reinforced its position as a major global blockbuster. Overall, Terminator Dark Fate's marketing and promotion strategy combined traditional advertising, digital innovation, fan engagement, and merchandising to create a comprehensive and dynamic campaign. It successfully built anticipation by leveraging nostalgia and star power while introducing new elements designed to refresh the franchise for contemporary audiences. The campaign's emphasis on memorable taglines, visually striking posters, and multi-platform engagement contributed to significant pre-release buzz and set the stage for the film's box office performance. Terminator Dark Fate is a film deeply rooted in franchise legacy, yet it attempts to stand as a modern evolution of the Terminator mythos. As the sixth installment in the long-running series, it exists in a complex web of sequels, reboots, and alternate timelines. To fully appreciate its place in the broader cinematic landscape, it's essential to compare it not only to previous Terminator films, but also to similar science fiction action titles and other works by the film's key creative minds. By analyzing how Dark Fate aligns with and diverges from these related works, a clearer picture emerges of its ambitions, challenges, and ultimate identity. One of the most direct comparisons lies with its spiritual predecessor, Terminator 2: Judgment Day. Dark Fate essentially positions itself as a direct sequel to that film, ignoring the events of Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines, Terminator Salvation, and Terminator Genisys. This creative decision was intentional, aiming to recapture the emotional depth and narrative clarity that made T2 a critical and cultural landmark. Like T2, Dark Fate features Sarah Connor as a hardened warrior figure, centers around a young person who holds the future of humanity, and involves a protector from the future sent to ensure their survival. However, where T2 succeeded in marrying groundbreaking special effects with a deeply human story, Dark Fate takes that formula and reworks it with updated themes and modern sensibilities. One notable difference is the way Dark Fate centers its narrative around a young Latina woman, Dani Ramos, reflecting contemporary discussions about representation, identity, and leadership. Whereas John Connor's journey in T2 was one of growth into a future messiah, Dani's arc is one of self-realization and transformation from an ordinary factory worker into a global leader. The shift from John to Dani marks a generational and cultural recontextualization of the chosen one trope. In terms of tone and structure, Dark Fate mirrors T2's mix of relentless action, emotional bonding, and philosophical undertones. Both films follow a protect the target narrative structure, where a relentless machine antagonist pursues a human target across various locations, culminating in a high-stakes final confrontation. The pacing, stakes, and even some set pieces bear resemblance to T2, such as highway chases, industrial backdrops, and high-tech laboratories. These similarities are intentional, serving as homage, while also attempting to recapture the excitement that defined the earlier film. However, critics and audiences noted that while Dark Fate aims for T2's intensity and intimacy, it sometimes lacks the innovation and emotional originality that made the earlier film iconic. Terminator 2 was revolutionary in its use of CGI and storytelling for the time, while Dark Fate, though visually impressive, treads familiar ground in terms of plot and structure. The presence of a liquid metal antagonist, for instance, echoes the T-1000, though the Rev-9 offers an upgrade with its ability to split into two autonomous units. Even so, this advancement did not produce the same sense of awe as its 1991 counterpart. When compared to Terminator 3, Salvation, and Genisys, Dark Fate is often viewed as a course correction. Terminator 3 continued the story but lacked the gravitas and depth of its predecessors. Salvation attempted a bold leap into the future war, but was criticized for its grim tone and lack of emotional anchor. Genesis, meanwhile, experimented with time travel and alternate timelines but received backlash for convoluted plotting and over-reliance on fan service. Dark Fate simplifies the timeline, grounds the story in present-day reality, and focuses on character-driven stakes. This choice aligns more closely with the emotional clarity of the first two films and distances itself from the spectacle-heavy confusion of Genesis. From a thematic standpoint, Dark Fate builds on the ideas of fate, choice, and humanity introduced in the earlier films. Like Terminator 1 and 2, it explores the fear of technological domination and the resilience of the human spirit. However, it adds contemporary layers, such as the implications of artificial intelligence beyond Skynet, global migration issues, and female empowerment in traditionally male-dominated narratives. These additions help distinguish it from earlier entries and give it a voice within modern sci-fi discourse. Comparing Dark Fate to other science fiction action films of the 2010s and 2020s, such as Mad Max, Fury Road, Edge of Tomorrow, and even Blade Runner 2049, further clarifies its identity. Like Mad Max, Fury Road, Dark Fate puts women at the narrative forefront, depicting them not as side characters, but as central figures driving the story. Grace and Danny, like Furiosa, represent strength, sacrifice, and leadership. However, where Fury Road was praised for its visionary direction and stylistic boldness, Dark Fate adheres to a more conventional visual and narrative approach. This conventionality may have contributed to its perception as less daring or groundbreaking in the modern cinematic climate. In comparison to Edge of Tomorrow, another action-packed time loop film with themes of redemption and sacrifice, Dark Fate similarly features characters learning from future events and enduring physical and emotional transformations. Yet Edge of Tomorrow's inventive structure and humor offered a refreshing twist on familiar tropes, while Dark Fate remains more rooted in traditional linear storytelling. This more familiar structure arguably limited its potential to stand out in an increasingly experimental genre. As for director Tim Miller, his previous success with Deadpool established him as a filmmaker capable of combining humor, action, and character-driven storytelling. While Dark Fate is a far more serious film than Deadpool, Miller's direction emphasizes kinetic energy and visual clarity. However, some critics noted that the humor and boldness that characterized his earlier work felt restrained in Dark Fate, possibly due to the heavier tone of the material or creative differences during production. This contrast suggests that while Miller's talent for action is evident, the constraints of working within a legacy franchise may have shaped his approach in more conservative ways. Arnold Schwarzenegger's portrayal of Carl in Dark Fate also stands in contrast to earlier iterations of the Terminator. In T2, he played the ultimate protector, stoic yet slowly humanizing. In Dark Fate, his character is allowed to evolve even further, embracing a life of domestic stability and moral introspection. This progression makes Carl one of the most interesting points of comparison across the series. While earlier versions of the Terminator were defined by their mechanical nature, Carl represents a vision of machines growing toward humanity. This philosophical development marks a meaningful evolution within the franchise's themes and sets Dark Fate apart. Sarah Connor, too, offers a point of comparison with her previous portrayals. In Terminator 1, she was an everywoman forced into extraordinary circumstances. In T2, she became a hardened warrior. In Dark Fate, she is a scarred veteran living with the loss of her son and a lifetime of battle. Her arc in this film continues her evolution, portraying the cost of fighting and the complexity of heroism. This multi-layered portrayal stands out even when compared to other strong female protagonists in sci-fi cinema.